Welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast, folks. We have a great show in store for you today. We sit down with a seventh generation Texan who is actually running for Congress right here in Texas in the 2nd Congressional District. But first,
hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Today with Tally. The mission and goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Today with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. Ladies and gentlemen, your host of the evening, Mr. Brian Tally.
2 years ago, Jameson Ellis ran for Congress when there was quite a few candidates out there, and now it's down to one this go round. Jameson is looking to unseat a very well-known member of Congress by the name of Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who seems to be more popular on a national scale than he is really in his own district. And with that, I would like to introduce to you guys and bring on the show Jameson Ellis. How are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing absolutely amazing. And man, I just want to say, Brian, thanks for having me on the show. I'm honored to be here.
Look, I would be doing myself and this podcast and the people here of Texas too a disservice if I didn't have you on, because I am a constituent of Dan Crenshaw's. I do live and reside in Texas too. So what you say today will not only hold a lot of weight with me, but with a lot of my listeners out there. So again, we thank you for your time and your efforts today on joining us here. The questions are going to be plain and simple. We're going to have a simple conversation here. We're going to talk about what's going on, some of the current events that are that continue to plague the country and the world, and really what type of new face, what can you bring to the table that, would definitely be different than what Dan is bringing. But look, you're a 7th generation, man. Explain that one, man. That's a long time in Texas, man. That's a long bloodline, buddy.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. We did some research, and I was only able to go back about 7 generations. But whenever I shared that with my Aunt Beverly, who now lives in Hobbs, New Mexico, believe it or not, but she's originally from Lubbock, Texas. That's where the Ellis side of the family comes from Northwest Texas. She was like, I'm fairly certain that you go back a lot further than that. And I was like, well, I was only able to go back about 7 generations. And so she's going to help me try to figure out if maybe I'm an 8th or even a 9th generation Texan. So we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm originally from Brady, Texas. So Brady is like smack dab the geographical center of Texas. If you look at a map of Texas, it is the geographical center, and it's known as the heart of Texas. And so that's where I'm from. I'm a country boy at heart, and that's why I'm excited to be where I'm at now here in Montgomery County. I'm not really a big fan of the big city. I'm a country boy. I have a special place in my heart for hard work and just that rural way of living. The farmers, the ranchers, the small business owners, those that actually fuel and are the backbone of our economy, not just here in Texas, but also just across the United States. And, I've always told people, that being here from Texas, I was born here, I was raised here, and I plan on dying here. So make sure that y'all pray for me whenever I have to go up to the swamp. So, yeah.
So what was life like growing up in Brady, Texas?
So I lived in Brady off and on as a kid. I mean, I can remember being 7 years old, and I spent a lot of time with my cousins, Wesley and Dan Verdell. So Dan Verdell is actually, if I remember correctly, he's living in Kerrville now, and he's actually a police officer out there in Kerrville. And then my cousin Wes, he's actually currently running for office, and he's also the Texas State Director for GOA, Gun Owners of America. But I can remember us getting into a lot of trouble. So we used to go to church. There was a church there called Brady Gospel Church. And right across the street from the Brady Gospel Church was probably the most creepy cemetery. I mean, it was super old, but of course for us, it was cool. So we'd go to the cemetery and we would play tag and we would play it. We'd go over there and we'd play. And then there was it's a big cemetery. But then there was a back fence back there, and we climbed the fence, and there were some horses that were back there, and we would try to ride those horses bareback, and they were pretty tame. But I just remember getting into a lot of trouble. My mom came looking for me, and I got my butt wore out. But no, it was some great times, man. I love the simple living of being out in the country. You learn the value of hard work and being able to appreciate just how great our state is, just how great the nation is. And it's something that I feel like we've lost, especially as more people have migrated more to the big cities because that's where all the jobs are. I feel like we've kind of lost a sense of what it's like to really bust your butt and work hard and live that simple life. And so, lucky for me, or maybe say it was just the footsteps of a righteous being ordered of the Lord, where we wound up in the district we wound up living in. We've been here in Conroe since 2021. This district is full of a lot of hardworking people, man. And so I feel right at home being here in Conroe. And when I've gone to Huffman and Crosby and Kingwood and out in East Montgomery, it's just those my kind of people, man, just blue collar, hardworking people.
Exactly what you touched on there. The American values, the American values and traditions, that we are accustomed to, and unfortunately I've been seeing a lot of that disappear. And I often say, man, I miss America. I miss America. I grew up, I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. It was a different way of life. I'm 46 years old. I find myself reminiscing a lot now. I don't know if it's kind of like, you're at that middle stage of your life where you begin to open your eyes on what you've done, what sort of legacy you may be leaving behind. What does the future generation of this country look like? And that's all very important. And a lot of it's not things that you think about when you're, say, a teenager or 20 or even in your early 30s. You're kind of in this bubble. You're living life in a comfortable state until something were to maybe happen or show up to your doorstep. You're not really thinking about maybe the things that can go wrong, or what can we do better in society, or how can I get involved in making my community or my state or my country a better place. Now, you moved to Conroe in 2021, and now I know this is your second go round running for Congress here in Texas too. And again, you're looking to defeat what the nation would declare as a superstar member of Congress, which I think that nobody should, ever have that type of moniker or whatever, if you will.
Agreed.
If you are a person working for the people, that should never be any idolization there that comes with that. Now, it didn't take you very long to throw your hat in the ring once you moved here. What inspired you to say, I want to run for Congress? Not only run for Congress, but run against Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, before we moved to Conroe, we lived in Spring. So both Conroe and Spring were in Congressional District 8 prior to 2022. So where this all started was May 25th of 2020 is significant for two primary reasons. Number one, because May 25th happens to be my birthday, but that also happens to be the day that the George Floyd incident happened. And what we saw over the next 60 days was over 500 declared riots and over 2,000 law enforcement officers injured in the line of duty. And so we saw BLM and Antifa literally burning down cities. Our government didn't do a damn thing. And this was also in the midst of a pandemic, okay, where where you had the government label people as non-essential, right? They shut down small businesses and mandated masks and destroyed family incomes. And a lot of the people in government didn't do a damn thing. And I believe that if you have a platform and you're not willing to stand up for your fellow man against that kind of tyranny, then you are no better than the tyrant themselves. And so we were in the middle of what we call a Blue Crew Live, because at the time I was a creative director for a nonprofit called Bridge the Blue. And so we were in the middle of what's called a Blue Crew Live. And it was on the day, because I remember the day that this happened. It was on the day that we had just found out that Austin had defunded its police department by a third of its budget, which was $150 million. So we were in our Facebook group. We were live on Facebook and we were talking about this. Well, hey, to keep a long story short, in the middle of that, I felt like I heard God just kind of tell me, run for Congress. But I kind of thought maybe it was the devil, because I'm not a politician, like me run for Congress. Nah, that's just got to be some kind of fleeting thought, or maybe it's the enemy. So I'm like, get thee behind me, Satan. Long story short, man, I didn't tell anybody about that. Again, I didn't think much of it. But 2 weeks later, I got a message from Miguel on Facebook. And you know how on Messenger, you have your primary inbox, but then you have that other folder, and that's for people that you're not connected to. So I went ahead and checked my other folder, and I had this message. I recognized the name because I'd seen her in our Bridge the Blue Facebook group. But long story short, man, she says, hey, can I share something with you? And I'm like, sure. She's like, I don't want to freak you out because I don't really know what you believe, but I was praying and God showed me you in Congress and showed me that he put that on your heart and you hadn't even told anybody, but I wanted to encourage you that that's what he wants you to do. So it kind of freaked me out in a really good way. It also kind of scared me half to death because I'm like, Congress, no way. Anyways, that night I told my wife, fast forward, this was 2021. So this was end of April, early May 2021. Mind you, we had moved to Conroe by this point. Okay. So, because we lived in Springs since 2017 or 2018, which was still in Congressional District 8. We moved to Conroe, still Congressional District 8. So my buddy John calls me and he says, hey, did you hear that Kevin Brady's not running for re-election? And I told him, no, I hadn't. And in that moment, I felt like I heard the Holy Spirit just tell me, just nudge me and say, it's your time. And so, without boring you with the details, that's how we got here. The first 24 hours, I was scared to death. After that first 24 hours, and let me explain why I was scared to death. I was scared to death because I'm not a public figure, right? I've never been interested in being a public figure. I've never really been interested in being in the spotlight outside of my 20s, whenever I actually played in a band, and that's what I wanted to do for a living. But outside of that, I never wanted to be a public figure, never wanted to be a politician, never wanted to go into politics. And I knew how nasty politics can be. I know the gaslighting that takes place. I've seen how they come after you and your family. And we've seen that. We saw it happen to Trump. We're seeing it continue to happen to Trump to this day. So I didn't know if I wanted to put myself through that. So I wanted to take the time to count the cost. Am I willing to go through this? And I made the decision that I was. So again, that first 24 hours, I was scared to death. But then the morning after, I woke up and my mindset was, how many butts do we have to kick to get the job done? And it's been, and pardon my language here, it's been balls to the wall ever since. And so, and later on that year in November, because remember, we are gearing up for the 2022 Texas primaries. 6 months I campaign in Congressional District 8. And then late October, early November, we learn about we knew that Texas was adding 2 new districts. Well, whenever you add something, you have to make room for it. Well, that shifted the district lines. So that actually shifted me out of District 8 and into District 2. So I had a decision to make. Do I continue running in the district that I no longer reside in after redistricting, or do I stand on my principles and instead run against the incumbent, which at that time and still to this day is Dan Crenshaw? So I made the decision to take a calculated risk, throw away 6 months of campaigning in Congressional District 8, and to focus the next 3 months, by the way, 3 months on running against Dan Crenshaw. So I wanted to share that because I didn't start out running for Congress specifically to run against Dan Crenshaw. That's not why I started running for Congress. I did it as a response to what I believe God called me to do. And somehow we just wound up here. And we did exceptionally well. We got almost 20% of the vote with only 3 months to campaign and only $45,000, which, by the way, he spent about $8 million. So he spent about $8 million for 74% of the vote. Between me and the other two candidates, we didn't spend any more than about $75,000 between the three of us, and we took 26%. Just so that your viewers understand how significant that is over half of what's needed to defeat Crenshaw once and for all. So that proves that the people in the district are fed up with the gaslighting. They're fed up with big government. They're fed up with status quo politics. And so yeah, that's actually why we're here. And that's why we're running again. It's still something that I believe that God wants me to continue pursuing. So here we are.
Jameson, you've had a lot more time, obviously, to prepare this go-round, unlike last time, the 3 months. You've had 2 years, basically, to get ready for this run on the big day of March 5th. Election Day is coming soon. What has the campaign trail looked like? And has it been a different feel than what it was 2 years ago?
100%. So in 2022, we were coming off of all the COVID tyranny. We were coming off of the 2020 election and all the shenanigans that went down with that. We were coming off a lot of people that were pissed off. And so there was a lot of energy in 2022. Of course, here in Congressional District 8, there was an open seat. So at one point, I think we had 12 or 13 candidates vying for that seat. We had 3 candidates primarying Governor Abbott. I mean, it was a very, very energetic and exciting campaign cycle, an election cycle. A lot of people were deflated by how the 2022 primaries turned out. So going into the general, there was still a little bit of excitement because everybody was expecting a red wave that never came. So then you fast forward to where we're at today, and we have seen our lieutenant governor, Ken Paxton. We have seen people come after him like never before. And a lot of it, I believe, is because of the way he actually is fighting back. It doesn't serve the interests of the establishment and the uniparty. It serves the interest of Texas, and the uniparty doesn't want that. And so they're, and I'm sure you're familiar with what happened. There was an impeachment trial, or he was impeached, and then it went to the Senate. There was a trial. He was actually found innocent. But I can tell you the energy here in Texas is primary anybody that stood against Ken Paxton. So what has that meant for my race? What that's meant for my race is that I have had to work even harder, because a lot of the grassroots organizations are really focused on local and state right now. So I have had to work exceptionally harder this go round. But I can tell you that even though people are so focused on local and state right now, the grassroots are, I can tell you that we've gained a lot of momentum. We've got a lot more support. It's evident by the explosion of my social media accounts. It's evident by the explosion of support. It's evident by some of our most recent endorsements. We've got a lot of momentum. And like you said, we've had a couple of years. I announced about a year ago. And, I just haven't quit, brother. I have continued and continued and continued to serve this district and to be active. And I'm really excited about what March 5th, 2024 is going to hold. I always tell people 2 years ago, we did really well. 2024, we finish the job that we started.
Now, you use the word interests. That brings me to my next question now. Is Congressman Dan Crenshaw working, and now this is in your opinion, your honest to God opinion, is Congressman Dan Crenshaw working in the best interest of his constituents?
Well, I mean, I can give you my opinion, but I want to take you to some facts. Okay, because the only thing that I use to judge our representatives by is their voting record, right? I honestly could care less about their personal lives. I don't know Dan Crenshaw personally. I don't care how he lives his life. I want to know, are you representing me in Congress? Well, let's just think back for a second, and I can go back as recent as November. So let me go back even further. So right now we've got an invasion happening along our southern border. I think it's over 8 million illegals have flooded into our country since Joe Biden took office and since Mayorkas was appointed. So there is an invasion. Just in October, there were 4,000 Chinese nationals that were caught entering our southern border. 4,000 Chinese nationals. That was 2023. In 2022, that number was just over 400. That's over a 900% increase in 1 year. And for over a year now, my opponent has been calling for the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas. So in November, he had a perfect opportunity. There was a vote on a resolution to impeach Mayorkas. And you would think that would have been important enough for Crenshaw to show up to. He didn't. My question is, where was he? Where was my representation on that vote? I can tell you that the border is the hill to die on right now. Because if we have an open border and we've got our enemies that are amassing there along our border and we're just letting them into the country, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw what happened in Ecuador yesterday. That is what's coming to America if we don't get our border secure. So where was my representation in November to impeach on that resolution to impeach Mayorkas? Nowhere to be found. So does that mean he's actively working against the interest of the people? I'll let the viewer and the voters decide that. In my opinion, absolutely. Now let's talk about a couple of other things. I've got lists, brother. So I want to go back to the National Defense Authorization Act. And this was recently, okay, there was a vote for the NDAA that renewed FISA Section 702, which is a clear violation of the 4th and 5th Amendment, and authorizes the warrantless spying of Americans. Does that? And he voted yay on that. Does this sound like someone that is working against liberty and working against the interests of his constituents? I'll let the viewers and I'll let the voters decide that. As for me, no, I like my 4th and 5th Amendment. It's there for a reason. And you give the government too much power, especially whenever these FISA courts, they happen behind closed doors with very little oversight. Who's to stop them from taking a mile whenever they're given an inch? This is the government that our founding fathers warned us about. And I'll just spitfire a couple of other things that I've actually have on a list over here. So he voted to pass a defense bill back in July of 2022 that allowed the military to discharge unvaccinated service members. And we can talk about this too, but it pisses me off whenever our men and women who serve our military can't even enjoy the same constitutional liberties that our citizens are afforded. And so, we could talk about that too. In May 2022, he voted to fund the war in Ukraine, right? I think it was $40 billion. Yeah, $40 billion. And that's just where it started. We continue to send American taxpayer dollars to Ukraine to help them secure their borders against Russia. Meanwhile, our borders are wide open. And we've got an invasion at our own southern border. But I guess just screw America, right? People say, oh, well, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can't walk because our legs have been cut out from underneath us, and we can't even afford a pack of gum, much less chew a stick of it. So, I mean, and I can go on and on and on. And so, and one last thing that I'll touch on here, because this is the one that actually got Dan Crenshaw on the radar for a lot of people, was support for red flag laws. Okay. Now, I like to push back a little bit on people because people just read a tweet. And I'm like, but has he ever voted for red flag laws? And a lot of people can't answer that question. Well, I'm going to give you the answer to that question. And in 2021, he actually did vote for the National Defense Authorization Act while it still had red flag laws in it, not slapped on me as a private citizen, but guess who? Veterans. Red flag laws against veterans. Is he actively working against his constituents? Is he actively working against America first, against the Constitution? I will let your viewers and the voters decide that. So,
I want to touch on the border. Dan Crenshaw is a veteran himself. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL. He understands, I know he does, without sovereignty, you don't have a country. I have been doing a ton of research on the southern border. FY22, there was 2.2 million that have entered our country, not including gotaways. FY23, 2.5 million entered, not including the gotaways, and not including who has already been here for years and years and years and years, that are still driving with no driver's license. They have no insurance. They're working for cash, and they're not contributing to the society that we all pay our fair share, or whatever they quote as our fair share, into the kitty, if you will. And that would be your tax dollars. Now, that's over 5 million people in 2 years. And I have to put it like this for people to fully understand what that is and what that looks like, what that package looks like. Milwaukee, St. Louis, Kansas City, Memphis, Tennessee, Oakland, California, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Indianapolis, and Boise, Idaho. All that right there within their city limits of those major cities equal 5 million people. How many more mouths are we going to have to feed in this country before we start running out of food? The supply chain can't keep up with who we have here now, let alone having an additional 5 million on top of whoever else that we have coming into our country. Whatever happened to protecting our borders? Whatever happened to having law and order? Whatever happened to, working on behalf of the American people? The American people, we have become voiceless. We are looking for somebody that is going to give the voiceless a voice again, because we are the people, but we haven't been the people for quite some time. And 2020 demonstrated what can happen when tyrannical type governments and agendas can very easily take over with no pushback. And I know people are now starting to wake up, but in 2020, nothing ever passed the smell test with me. And as we get further and further down this rabbit hole, so-called conspiracies are now becoming truth and fact. And a lot of people have a hard time really identifying with that, because they say, how can that even be possible? We live in the United States of America. Well, folks, like Jameson said, look what is going on in Ecuador. That's coming soon to a neighborhood near you. We have world strife going on. We have a defense secretary who spent the last week and a half in ICU at Walter Reed, and no one knew about it. It's like, dude, if I'm not going to go to work, I have to call in sick or I lose my job. This guy goes and does dereliction of duty for a week and a half before somebody picks up on it, while definitely he needs to be in that hot seat, in that driver's seat, freaking commanding the world, basically. We have troops right now in the Red Sea, and our defense secretary is on ICU somewhere. I mean, come on. It's like, who are we as Americans, and what is going on in our country to constitute all of this madness that we see happening in DC, again, with little to no pushback? And it is absolutely asinine to even picture this, but we're living it. And again, it makes absolutely no sense. And when things don't make any sense, and when there's no transparency, when there's no accountability, that can be very dangerous. And I'll tell you why. When the American people aren't told the truth and given answers to simple questions, they are going to start to look elsewhere for their answers. And people are going to start to draw their own conclusions. And typically those conclusions aren't going to be perhaps the real conclusions. And that's what leads to conspiracy theories. That's what leads to misinformation and disinformation, which oftentimes leads to not good things happening. Now, Congressman Dan Crenshaw literally became an overnight celebrity when he took office in 2019, did the whole Saturday Night Live thing. Everybody knew who he was. Oh my God, I love this guy. And again, the idolization and the worshiping of an elected official is something that should never happen in this country. I don't care if it's Trump or whoever. You can't be idolized with somebody who's trying to give you a voice or lack thereof, because there are going to be things that you don't agree on. So, it's not going to be like, your favorite sports character or Superman or God or whoever. These elected officials are not that. They are there to protect and to help distribute tax dollars where they should be going, infrastructure, protect the American people, protect the populace, the whole 9 yards. On August 4th of 2019, he did drop that tweet in support of implementing red flag laws, like you had already talked about. He's a veteran himself. He's a Navy SEAL. And what Dan Crenshaw did will forever leave a black eye on his legacy due to the immediate overreach that he tried to implement, not only here in the Texas congressional districts, but on a national stage, because now he had that national voice. He had that celebrity tag to him, and he still does. And there's not a lot of people that know this on a national scale, that he's not very well liked in his district, and the majority of his campaign funds coming from California. That's something right there that needs to be said and talked about. He is far more respected outside of his district than he is inside of his district. This is about Jameson Ellis running for Congress, running to be somebody different than Dan Crenshaw and replacing him and unseating him to give the people of Texas to a voice again. Can you explain some of your agenda items that will be a day one for Jameson Ellis if elected?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for kind of shifting the conversation a little bit, because one of the things that is really important to me for this election is I don't want to give people someone to vote against, right? I want to give people someone to vote for. And so this is going to be a great segment to really talk about what differentiates me from not only Dan Crenshaw, but the rest of the establishment. Because I really do believe that the majority of people, not only here in the district, but also across the state of Texas, and, dare I say, even nationwide, this is going to be, I think this is really going to resonate with a lot of people. So let's hit on a few things. Day one. So day one, I want to work to enforce the laws that are already on the books. Right. So, Article 4, and let me just give you a quick example. Article 4, Section 4 guarantees every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect them, each of them, against invasion. Right. This is directly from the Constitution of the United States, something that is not being enforced. And we briefly touched on this earlier. Over 8 million illegals that have invaded our southern borders since Biden took office and since Mayorkas was appointed. right? 4,000 Chinese nationals caught back in October of 2023, an over 900% increase, right, since October of 2022, right? This invasion intentionally undermines our national security and our sovereignty. And so we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books. And that actually leads into the second thing, day one, that I want to do is, my job as a federal employee or a representative of the people, I should say, in the U.S. House is to limit the government, not expand it. And so drafting new bills and legislation expands and grows the government, right? It doesn't limit it, and the question I like to ask is, why in the hell do we need to create more legislation whenever we can't even follow the laws that are already on the books, right? Why the hell do we need to just create more things to follow that are probably going to be ignored and not followed? And we have a track record of it. Our Constitution is soaked in piss right now. Our Second Amendment rights are being violated by every single state in this union. Anytime that you require a license, anytime that you require training, anytime, and I'm not saying these things aren't good, but I'm saying requiring them is an infringement, because the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is not a privilege. People want to say, well, you got to have a license to drive. Well, that's because driving's a privilege. It's not a right. Traveling is a right, but driving is a privilege. Owning a firearm, being able to defend yourself, that is a right, unalienable to us, given by God, not government. We need people that are going to actually vote down legislation and stand between those bad bills and constituents from day one. I plan on doing that to try to limit the government. And then and only then, once we have that under control and we start following some of these things, can we go back and following the laws that are on the books, can we then start looking at creating and writing new legislation? Now, let's talk about some legislation that I am very much for, because my stance on this really hasn't changed in 2 years. And you'll probably find, and this may be kind of boring to some people, I'm probably one of the most consistent people that you'll find. So I've always said my job is not to create new legislation, not in 2024. We need to ensure that the laws that are on the books are actually enforced. We need to get back to rule of law, because otherwise creating new legislation doesn't matter. We also need to stand against bad bills. That was the second thing, just as a review. This has been my message for over 2 years. But let's talk about the third thing. Let's talk about legislation that day one that I do want to start advocating for. And let's talk about how to actually achieve each of these things. So first thing I'm going to mention is term limits. Term limits is extremely important. Our government, or our founding fathers, never intended this role to be a lifetime job, a job for life. Right. And what we're seeing happening right now, Brian, is we're seeing people that they do well in the job interview. They fool all of us. And then they go to Congress. And then basically, because we've been lulled into complacency, the American people have, we've been gaslit into a place of complacency and comfortability. We don't really pay close attention to the details. We don't pay attention to the little things that they're sneaking in these omnibus bills, and the fact that they're still voting for it with all this pork. They're still voting yes on it, which is then increasing our deficit. That's then wasting our tax dollars with all this reckless. We're not paying attention. So they do well in the interview, but it's not like they're given a company credit card and then they just spend it on whatever and don't even think about how it's going to affect us. Right? Term limits will fix that. And so specifically, when we talk about term limits, I believe 4 terms, and this is based on data, 4 terms, 8 years. Why? Because if you look at a conservative congressman, other than my opponent, so if you look at what's ironic, my opponent, his very first term in Congress was actually his worst. A lot of people don't know that. So it's no surprise to me that 2019 he comes out in favor of red flag laws. I'm not surprised. But usually the first 8 years that legislators' voting record is conservative. And then after about 8 years, it starts to take a nosedive. So that's actually based on data. I also want to advocate for, or I also will advocate for the fair tax and which includes repealing the 16th Amendment, by the way. So for those that don't know, the 16th Amendment is the progressive income tax. So the fair tax, and I just want to share some things because there's a lot to the fair tax. It does away with the income tax. You get to take home 100% of your income. So it's not a tax on income. It's actually a tax on what you spend, not what you earn. So just a few things here. Fair tax does away with all forms of income tax. That's the corporate income tax, personal income tax, payroll tax, gift and estate taxes, all federal income-based taxes. It is a consumption tax. Instead of taxing what we earn, it taxes what we spend. So we are 100% in charge of how much or how little taxes we actually pay. No exclusions, no exemptions, no deductions. It's revenue neutral. Okay. So that means that it's designed to raise the same amount of money as is raised under the current federal income tax. This means Social Security, Medicare and the like are protected. Okay. I think that's important to point out. So how does it grow the economy? Because it definitely does. It sparks job creation and economic growth by eliminating 90% of compliance costs for businesses. It untaxes savings, investments, work, and productivity. Interest rates drop because untaxing savings means people will save more. And when more people are saving money, the cost to borrow actually goes down. And when U.S. businesses are no longer taxed on exports and business, international trade benefits, and more businesses will want to relocate here to produce goods and services. So we always talk about made in America. We always talk about how we buy everything from China and Taiwan. It's because it's cheaper, right? But what if things were cheaper to be made here in America? Well, that's what we're talking about here. One other thing that I want to mention, because we've been talking about the border. So the fair tax actually de-incentivizes illegal immigration because those illegals will be forced to pay into the tax system at the cash register. So no more illegals that don't pay into the tax system, and they will be paying the highest tax rate. So there's a lot more we can go into about that. For the sake of time, I'll move on to the next. Single subject bills. We have single subject legislation here in the state of Texas. We need that here as well. So in at the federal level, because it shouldn't take hours and hours and hours, and there shouldn't be thousands or hundreds or thousands of pages in a damn bill. We need transparency. Single subject legislation will bring that transparency and accountability back to the Congress. And then last thing that I want to, two more quick things, outlawing members of Congress from owning and trading stocks while they're members of Congress. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I hear from a lot of constituents that they believe that there's a lot of insider trading going on. Now, I'm not going to accuse anybody of a crime without proof, but I definitely believe that we do need to outlaw members of Congress from owning and trading stocks as long as they hold office. The last thing that I want to bring up, I've been talking to and working with a lot of veterans. And it's crazy to me how this is important to me, someone who didn't serve in the military, someone who's can't identify as a veteran, that I seem to care about this, but my opponent doesn't. But I talked to a lot of veterans that they have PTSD from the way they've been treated by the VA, which, by the way, for those that may not know, is the largest bureaucracy and most powerful bureaucracy here in the country. And the rates are off the charts. They cannot get the treatment that they need. You know, you go talk to a counselor at the VA, and there's that saying that, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Well, I found out that that's actually a lie. It's not okay to not be okay, because the moment that you do that, there is a flag. What color do you think it is? It's red. There is a red flag added to your name, and it goes into a federal database that keeps you from several things, including owning a firearm. There are a lot of things that we need to be doing for our veterans, including getting them access to things like neurofeedback therapy, something they don't currently have access to, alternative methods of dealing with the depression, the PTSD, and all of the stuff that they experience, not just on the battlefield and a result of the job that they did while serving the country, but by our own freaking government. And so, I didn't mean to go. I apologize if I went a little long on sharing those things, but those are the things day one that the top 3 things day one that I'm going to work to build coalitions for, because, and let me just, one more thing. The only way this is going to happen, because I can't do it by myself as a single member of Congress, the only way this is going to happen is we've got to build coalitions both in Congress and in the district. And we've got to put pressure on those that don't see things the way that we do. We've got to put pressure on other legislators to join this fight, put pressure on other legislators to grow a set of cojones, to put pressure on other legislators to do the right thing, or our coalitions will expose them to their constituents. We can vote their butts out of there. And I'm specifically talking to the Republicans. So we have so many nutless Republicans in office. Otherwise, the coalitions that I build will work to expose their voting records to their constituents so that we can vote their butts out and get an America First person in there that has a set of nuts that we can actually get something done. And so, man, I'm getting fired up now. And so I'm going to go ahead and be quiet because I might say something that you might not want me to say.
No. I mean, just being you. I mean, that's what we're trying to get out to the general public here. But everything you said, it all sounds great. A lot of people will say, they always say things that sound great, and then they get into office and everything changes. They get corrupted by the system. People begin to feel disenfranchised, like they have been for generations. We are running an endless cycle here of people always being extremely angry with how the government runs. And again, the people feeling disenfranchised and feeling picked on and feeling like they are doing everything that they possibly can to raise their family in an honorable fashion by paying their taxes. And the more that they contribute in a positive fashion, the more that the government punishes you. The least you do, the more you're rewarded. Case in point, right now, as we speak.
Oh yeah.
There is a high school. There is a high school right now in New York City. Mayor Eric Adams. Now, this is a good question. I want to know what you would do as a member of Congress in this. I want to know what sort of letter that you would write or what sort of action that could be taken. We have a school right now, a high school, that is closed today. They are doing online learning. Why? Well, they're housing 2,000 illegal immigrants in there. And under the darkness of night, last night, they were bussed in on school buses to this school. So the children that are supposed to be learning in this school don't have an opportunity to do that today and probably for the rest of the week. Is this something that we may be seeing more of in other cities? Our taxpayer dollars go to these schools to give our children the best education to make them great citizens, productive members of society. And when you have city leaders preventing school from going on in person to facilitate illegal aliens, people that have crossed into this country illegally, that have broken the law, and that have become a siphon on the very society that is now falling apart. How would you react, and what would you do, say, and act to this very thing that's going on right now on January the 10th of 2024?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that should be done, and I think that if I remember correctly, this week, I think there's another vote that's coming up for it. I might be mistaken, but Mayorkas needs to be gone. Okay, so here's the thing: is that I am really big, Brian, on not treating symptoms, but on getting down to the root cause of the issue, and we have to look at where we're at. How did we get here? The only way to do that is to reverse engineer and go back. At the end of the day, this didn't happen whenever Trump was in office. It's happening now because Biden is the first president to desecure the southern border. I mean, think about that for a second.
I want to hold you up right there. What is the motivation of the United States of America to intentionally create this border crisis that is literally destroying the very fabric of our nation?
Oh, because they hate America. It's to take me. So let's look at the broader picture, right? So let's look at the World Economic Forum. Let's look at the World Health Organization. Let's look at the UN. And let's look at our involvement in all of that and how we just bow and kowtow to their demands, right? This is about destroying the sovereignty of the United States. This is about, right now we are the last, and this flame is dimming out very, very quickly. We are the last beacon of liberty on this planet. And, other nations, the world hates us for that. Not everybody, but our enemies hate us for that. And so, yeah, there is a concerted effort to destroy America from within. Okay, so they're putting pressure on the outside. They're literally raping us of our money and resources whenever we're sending money to Ukraine, for example. But then simultaneously, our enemies are amassing at our southern border. They're invading. And it's only just going to be a matter of time. I think about, sleeper cells, right? Again, I don't mean to get all conspiracy here, but it's happening. And so something has to change. And so let me just share, if I can really quick, what I would propose. Now, this is going to require a lot of pressure being put on other legislators. This is also going to require building coalitions to get it done. But if I had my way, here's what I would do to fix this. First thing that I would do was I would have a moratorium on immigration, 4 to 10 years minimum, because we cannot accept anybody new into our country until we get this under control. We also need to lock down the ports of entry. We need boots on the ground, actively repelling the invasion. We need to end catch and release. We also need to de-incentivize these illegals from coming over here by no longer giving them access to health care, by no longer giving them welfare, by allowing them to enroll in school, right? These are criminals, and we need to treat them as such. And so these are things that need to be done. And we've got to get it under control, because if we don't, and one last thing that I'll say is deport all illegals, no questions asked. Again, these are criminals, and they may be good people at heart, some of them, but I can tell you that what the cartels are doing, the women, the children, the drugs, the fentanyl that's being trafficked, it's all to destroy our country. And my question is, how much are these shills being paid to just let it happen? This is the problem that we have in our country. It's not only just members of the House and elected officials that don't have a nutsack. It's also people that value, people that are serving, quote unquote serving, that value profit over people. This is the problem, and there's other things that we can talk about on how to de-incentivize that. Some of the ideas that I have, people think it's unrealistic. I don't think it is. But we can talk about that or not. I don't know what your time constraints look like, but I've got some ideas on how to de-incentivize that crap.
Dan Crenshaw, when he became a member of Congress and he was elected late 2018, started in 2019, one of his fellow brother in arms, and this is a very big story, retired U.S. Navy SEAL Chief Eddie Gallagher found himself in a bit of trouble as he was wrongfully accused of so many horrible things and actions that just didn't happen. It drew national attention, not only from just the news media, but all the way up to the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, at the time. Now, in his weakest and most vulnerable time in need, he is sitting in the brig while his brother is walking those very halls of Congress that I was walking during that same time. Now, they went to Congressman Dan Crenshaw and he was ignored. As I was too when I was trying to pass veteran legislation. I too was ignored. And when you start to connect these dots here on how he is working literally against the very institution that you fought for and defended, and you're going against your very brothers in arms and your sisters in arms for what? For what sort of better interest? They had gotten a letter that 50 congressional members had signed on. That were asking for his immediate release so he could prepare for trial and literally be given that constitutional right to prepare. Let's not forget about the 8 exemplary and honorable overseas combat deployments as a U.S. Navy SEAL. This guy's seen and things that you just can't unsee. And he did the job of the American people.
I couldn't even imagine.
I mean, this guy is the epitome of a U.S. Navy SEAL. And I personally know his character and who he is. He's been on this show. And Eddie Gallagher's a great man. But Congressman Dan Crenshaw didn't sign on to that letter. Additionally, he took action to try to keep him locked up for even longer. And in that action he took, he didn't want any visitors. The only people that can come see you are your own attorneys. Now, what type of leader, what type of congressman, what type of retired U.S. Navy SEAL would leave your fellow brother in arms out to hang, literally do an about face and leave Eddie and his family holding the bag with his life dwindling away again as he's sitting in the brig, not knowing if he will ever see sunshine again? And that right there says so much about Congressman Dan Crenshaw and his motivations to this country. And really, it seems as if he really likes DC. He doesn't spend a lot of time here in district.
No,
I'm very politically involved. I never get emails or see anything. I might hear about it 5 or 6 days later. Hey, we had a town hall here and there, but I'm like, I never got an email. Like, are you only inviting like your friendly constituents? Is this like the good old boy network that can only show up to these events? Or like, why can't just a regular Joe like me who pays my taxes and contributes in an honorable way and has 4 kids and has been married for 26 years and that's a veteran of this country show up to one of your events? Am I not invited? Are you not looking out for my best interest? Are you not giving me a voice, Congressman?
First, let me just say this, is that these people that are supposed to be serving in Congress, They're not our leaders. We need to stop referring to them as leaders, as honored leaders. I see all the time where people feel honored because such and such is going to be here at this fundraiser. Oh, I want to go meet them, take a picture of them. That's bogus. That's BS. They are supposed to be our workhorses. We are their boss. They are there to represent us. So let me just say, I'm not running to be your leader, your savior, your superhero. I'm not Jesus Christ. I'm not the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. I am running to represent you and work for you, not the lobbyists and the special interests in Washington. That being said, when it comes to Dan Crenshaw specifically, here's what I know, just based on life, based on the experiences that I have, and a lot of the mentors that I've had throughout my life, is that, a lot of people say money is the root of all evil. That's not biblical. Money's a tool. It's neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And money in and of itself is an amplifier, right? So if you were a conceited jerk, selfish a-hole when you're broke, when you get money, that's going to be amplified. If you weren't a greedy, selfish, jerk before you got money, then that will also be amplified and evident in your charitable giving and in your mission-focused life. I can only speak to that principle. Eddie Gallagher, because I researched this, Eddie Gallagher had 7 charges brought against him. He was acquitted of 6. The one that stuck, he had already served time for. There has been a lot of lies, a lot of gaslighting. And the question that you pose is a great one, and if somebody could answer that for me, or you, or any of us that have those same questions. And one, I want to tack on to something that you said, Brian, is that he didn't just take an oath to defend the Constitution. He took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. But how do you uphold the Constitution whenever you actively work to strip not just Eddie Gallagher, but Americans in general of due process?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I honestly believe the only one who could ever answer that question is going to be my opponent. And I'm not going to call him one thing or the other. But that principle holds true. Money will amplify who you really are. And again, if you're a selfish jerk before you have money, that's really going to come out once you get it. And how much money does Crenshaw have now? He's done pretty well on the stock market. That's all I'm going to say.
He publicly displayed ruthless intention on a very highly decorated 8 combat tour, retired U.S. Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher.
Let me ask you this, Brian, because you're a Marine Corps veteran, right? Do you think there could be some jealousy there?
I don't think so. I think it just could be a complete abuse of power, really, at the end of the day. I couldn't see him being jealous over a guy. Dan was put in some situations too in combat. He's a member of Congress. Dan will often look down on people, and I don't know him. I just observe, and through whether it's congressional hearings, or if it's TV interviews, or if it's in print, he comes across as somebody that likes to speak down on people, and not equally. If you're not equally yoked with the congressman, he doesn't really consider you to even be there. He's demonstrated that at functions here in the district with children just asking him a simple question. There's no jealousy to be had there. This guy was still serving active duty. He was in the brig. This was all going on in San Diego, California, off the base of Coronado there, when Gallagher's family went out and got this letter in support with 50 members of Congress on it to release him so he could prepare for the trial of his life and give him that constitutional right, and not strip him of that, but to work against him. And what I'm trying to say is, if Congressman Dan Crenshaw can show that type of motivation and that type of ruthlessness against a man like Eddie Gallagher, what is he doing to a Joe or a Diane or a Billy and Bob in his own district?
Yeah, and that was, and you had briefly touched on this a second ago, Lana Burkhart, she is a very, very strong Christian at the time, 2 years ago, first-time voter, just turned 18 years old. And she had an issue with something that Crenshaw said on the Jocko podcast. And it had to do with her, with him, basically, Crenshaw comparing Jesus to Superman. And, and here's the thing, man, like, I'm not going to gaslight Crenshaw on this. I know from experience that whenever you're on a podcast, whenever you're standing in front of a crowd, there is a pressure there, and it's very, very easy sometimes to misspeak. And so could that be what Crenshaw was doing on the podcast? Sure. But that's not the focus. The focus is on how he responded to Lana. So Lana asked him a legit question. It was a concern that she had, and his response was to basically talk down to her and demand that she not question his faith. And, I'm sorry, but I mean, you're a representative, and, we're in the Bible Belt, and there's a lot of strong Christians in this district, and they want to know that you have a backbone to stand up for your faith. They want to know that whenever you claim to be a Christian, that you actually are a Christian. And it wasn't a slight against him. It was just asking for clarification. The last thing that I'll say, man, is he had a perfect opportunity to walk in humility and just say, Lana, that's a great question. And, I definitely misspoke. And let me kind of explain what I meant by this. He had an opportunity to build a bridge with a first-time voter, and instead he burned one down.
Jameson, hey, look, I appreciate you coming on the show. Do you have any final words that you'd like to get out there to the folks of Texas too?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, Brian, thank you for having me on, and thanks to the viewers for putting up with me. I know that I'm not as polished as maybe some of your other guests, but man, it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, so let me just say a few last words here. So again, my name is Jameson Ellis, and that's Jameson like the whiskey. Yes. So it's easy to remember. The difference is I won't leave you with a hangover in the morning, but like I said, I am a seventh generation Texan. I'm not a polished politician or a professional politico. Okay. I'm just your average, everyday, hardworking American, and that loves my God, my country, and my family. And in that order: God first, always, then country, and then family. And the reason why I put country before family is because I agree with Benjamin Rush, founding father Benjamin Rush, who believed and who said that if we ever lose control of our country, that it will become the great enemy of our families. And honestly, that's what we're seeing, guys. All the way from Congress and the courts to the classrooms to our southern border and our small family-owned businesses. And I believe that it's going to take a rebellious outsider that is willing to go on the offense. Because here's what I've learned. Played football all throughout high school, been very competitive. So here's what I've learned is that offense wins games. Defense just tries not to lose. And unfortunately, the political class has for too long been working against us and gaslighting us into forgetting one of the most paramount principles that you can find in the Declaration of Independence. And that says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Consent of the governed. That's you. That's me. That's us. That's we, the people. And so Texas belongs to you, not the likes of triggered neocon political puppets. America belongs to us, not the likes of unelected bureaucrats and special interests. And so I am running to represent you. I'm running to be your voice. And so, I'm humbly asking for your support. You can go to jamesonellis.com. I think as we're here on this podcast, it is currently under construction, but you can go there. I've got several videos on there. You can donate. We need your donations if we're going to go up, if we're going to continue to keep this momentum going against Crenshaw. I'd also ask that you join my email list as well to stay in contact with me, stay in touch with me. But I am running to be your constitutional conservative voice, jamesonellis.com. Again, Brian, man, it's been an honor. It's been a privilege. Thank you so much for having me on and for giving me a platform and for allowing me to interact with you and your viewers, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. No problem, man. Again, I appreciate you coming on the show and, giving us, a lot of insight into what your agenda items would be and a little bit about you, who you are, and, again, what your plans are and how you plan to implement those very plans. Folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the program. It has never been easier to listen to this podcast. We're on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Folks, simply search Today with Tally. Also learn more about me and my personal story and perhaps even get my new book at briantally.com. That's briantally.com. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time for the Today with Tally podcast, this is Brian Tally. Good night. Semper Fi. God bless.